Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh Ji. In continuation of our last show at University of Birmingham with Dr. Kanta Kumar, today we are joined by Dr. Palak Trivedi, who's an associate professor at the university and also is doing his duty at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We're going to talk about a topic which we all think that we know about, but you'd be surprised to know there's so much out there regarding our livers that we may not be aware of. So, ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਪਾਲਕ ਟ੍ਰਿਵੇਦੀ ਦਾ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਲਿਵਰਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਲਿਵਰ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਡਿਜ਼ੀਜ਼ਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਲਿਵਰ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, that is only because of having excessive alcohol. But as I said before, we'd be surprised ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰੂੰਗੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਟ੍ਰਿਵੇਦੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਿ ਕੱਲਾ alcohol ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. There are many other things that can affect your liver health. So without wasting any more time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Trivedi. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope I've done justice to speaking about what liver diseases possibly can be. Yeah?
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
So as I just mentioned, Dr. Trivedi, you know, in South Asian communities, we always hear about this common misconception, we can say, that somebody's liver is not up to the mark because they've been having too much alcohol. Or if we get to know that somebody's liver is, you know, is now infected, he's got a liver disease, then we start to wonder that, oh, but that person doesn't really consume so much alcohol, then what possibly can be the reason? Or perhaps he may be having it and we didn't know about it. So, you know, somehow liver diseases are always connected with just alcohol, and we're just so unaware of many other reasons that can possibly be affecting our liver. So can we start from there? That is alcohol the only or major reason for liver diseases?
It's a very good question. You're not the only ones to have that conception. In fact, in the Western world, United Kingdom, North America, Western Europe, the leading cause of liver disease is not actually alcohol. The leading cause of liver disease are things like diabetes, obesity, unhealthy eating. And when we say liver disease, what we are talking about is when the liver becomes scarred and eventually might stop working. And that can be a life-threatening condition. In the eastern parts of the world, so where many of us are from, sort of back in India, for example, the commonest reason for liver disease is actually a virus, hepatitis B. And we see infection from hepatitis B transmitted through bodily fluids. Other types of viruses can also cause hepatitis through contaminated water and food supplies. So the feeling that you can only have liver disease from alcohol is certainly wrong. And in fact, that's no longer the leading reason why people have liver disease in the UK or elsewhere in the world.
Well, personally, even myself, you know, although I do come from an educated background, but when we speak of liver diseases, even my knowledge is quite limited to perhaps, let's say, cirrhosis or fatty liver. But can you explain to us a little bit detailed what are the diseases, what are their names, and what possibly can be the symptoms that people might be experiencing, but they're unaware that it's related to a liver disease?
Sure, absolutely. So the term cirrhosis essentially means scarring in the liver that is not going to, or very unlikely to, get better. It's like if you think of your liver like a car, it's like having lots and lots of dents in it, but these dents can compromise the function, can make the liver not work properly. So that is a picture of what the liver looks like. That's what cirrhosis means. Fatty liver disease is a process that can cause cirrhosis. So if somebody has diabetes, high blood pressure, is overweight, doesn't exercise much and consumes lots of ultra-processed foods rather than fresh foods, they are at risk of developing many different conditions, including deposition of fat on the liver. And that is what I mentioned earlier on as being the leading cause of liver disease in the UK. Now, alcohol is another major driver of liver injury, and people often feel that you have to consume lots and lots and lots of alcohol for your liver to be damaged, but are somewhat surprised when we tell them that the amount of alcohol that you can consume in healthy doses is much less than they think. For a man, in a week, consuming what we classify as 21 units, that's 21 half pints of alcohol, 21 small glasses of wine, is what the recommended weekly limit is. And for women, it's even less. It's 14 units, so 14 glasses of, small glasses of wine or half pints of beer. That's it. And consuming more than that does put people at risk of developing liver damage and eventually developing scarring or cirrhosis, as I talked about. There are less common causes of liver diseases, for example, viruses that I mentioned, much more common in India, much less common here in the United Kingdom, but also conditions that sometimes people can be born with, or conditions where the immune system, which normally fights infection, sometimes starts attacking the liver. And these rarer conditions, whilst they are uncommon, they are certainly sort of worth mentioning because they comprise a big indication for why people need liver transplantation in the UK. So fatty liver disease and alcohol and viruses are certainly the most common, but rarer conditions such as autoimmune liver diseases can also cause liver injury. Now, how do you know if you've got one? Well, first of all, if you have a risk factor, for example, diabetes, being overweight, have high blood pressure, and certainly if you do consume alcohol to excess, it's important to see your doctor and just ask them about liver health. Talk to them about whether having a liver blood test is important. And if somebody has liver disease, they don't always have to have symptoms. But one of the earliest symptoms that we see in some forms of liver disease is itching, particularly itching over the palms of the hands or soles of the feet. The itching in these particular areas should prompt a doctor to look at your liver blood tests and see whether there's sort of an issue. A non-specific symptom of liver disease is fatigue, feeling tiredness, and not the sort of tiredness that you just get tired earlier in the day, but tiredness from doing very little things, such as going shopping, an inability to concentrate. And again, this is a very general symptom, but should trigger somebody doing some blood tests, particularly if you've got other risk factors for liver disease. When people develop cirrhosis and liver disease becomes more advanced, then more severe symptoms can become evident, such as yellowing of the skin and eyes. That's what we call jaundice. That's a very extreme presentation or symptom that people can have. And if people start to develop wasting of the muscles in the arms and legs with a very swollen tummy, that could perhaps indicate that you have water, fluid in the abdomen, which is another severe presentation of liver disease. And perhaps the most severe sort of presentation is when people start to develop confusion and not able to process thought very clearly, or start to vomit profusely, particularly vomiting of blood. These are very extreme presentations that we see in people whose liver disease has reached the end stages. So to summarize, if you have certain risk factors like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, if you have any of the symptoms that I talked about, and certainly if you have a family history of liver disease or any form of autoimmune condition like arthritis and so on, please do see your doctor and have your liver tests checked.
ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ, ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਡੀਅנס ਸੁਣ ਰਹੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਇਟਸ ਸੋ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਕਿ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਮਝ ਆਏ ਟੂ ਲੁੱਕ ਆਊਟ ਫॉर द ਸਾਇੰਸ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲਿਵਰ ਡਿਜ਼ੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ early detection will lead to prevention. So ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ that one of the reasons ਇੱਕ ਸਾਈਨ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੱਥਾਂ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੈਰ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਖਾਜ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ unnecessarily ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੁਣ ਖਾਜ ਹੋਣੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਈਨ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਆ ਪਤਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਿਵਰ 'ਚ ਕੁਛ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਡਾਇਬਟੀਜ਼ ਵਰਗੀ ਕੋਈ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣਾ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਹੋਰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਡਾਇਬਟੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਿਕਾਇਤ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਿੰਪਟਮ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਜਾਣ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਹੱਥਾਂ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਪੈਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਖਾਜ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਮੀਡੀਏਟਲੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਲਾਹ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਐਂਡ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਤ੍ਰਿਵੇਦੀ ਨੇ ਦੱਸੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਜੌਂਡਿਸ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੌਂਡਿਸ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੀਲੀਆ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਅੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਪੀਲਾ ਪੀਲਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੰਗ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਨਾਲ ਜੇ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੇ ਸਿੰਪਟਮਸ ਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮਸਲਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਪਤਲੇ ਹੋਣੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਭਾਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਘਟਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਥਕਾਨ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਆ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨਾ ਵਾਸਤਾ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਡਨਲੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਕਾਫੀ ਫਟੀਗ ਲੱਗਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਥੱਕ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਇਮੀਡੀਏਟਲੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਈਨ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਲਿਵਰ ਡਿਜ਼ੀਜ਼ ਤੋਂ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਅੱਗੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਹੋਰ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਕੇਸਿਸ ਵੀ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਸੋ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਛੇਤੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਟੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਓਨਾ ਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਵਧੀਆ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਆਈ ਵਾਸ ਜਸਟ ਵੰਡਰਿੰਗ ਪਰਹੈਪਸ ਵੀ ਸ਼ੁਡ ਆਲਸੋ ਸਪੀਕ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਯੋਰ ਰੋਲ ਐਟ ਦੀ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ hospital, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, apologies, because then we can further know about your experiences in perhaps gender of the patients, perhaps the demographics, age-wise or community-wise. We can speak about that once we know what your current role is at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
Sure. So I'm a consultant hepatologist. That means that I specialise in people who have illnesses relating to the liver. And I'm also a gastroenterologist, so I look after people who have certain bowel conditions. My main areas of interest within liver disease is liver transplantation, but also how changes in our bowel, in our gut, influence the development and progression of liver diseases. What we have started to realise is that over the course of many years, the number of people that we see with liver diseases is rising year on year. Now, a lot of that is to do with the fact that we are eating less healthily than our ancestors did. We are eating more processed foods. Sadly, there is a community of people who are drinking more alcohol. But also, when we see people of Indian origin who present with liver disease, they come to our hospital much later than people who are of white race or other ethnicities. And that is a big problem that I would like to communicate with our community, is that if you have symptoms and signs, please come to us early, because early diagnosis means earlier treatments and a greater chances of prevention and cure for more serious things in future. In this hospital, I look after people with all forms of liver disease, but particularly have an interest in those individuals whose immune system has started to attack the own body, has started to attack the liver and or the bowel for reasons that we can't yet identify. Now, a large number of these people do come to need liver transplantation, where we remove their liver because it's not working so well, and we put somebody else's liver in that person's body. So part of my role is assessing people to see if they need a liver transplant, if so, when do they need one, and what are the risks associated with such an operation. And when my surgical colleagues do that operation, I'm involved in providing the aftercare to be sure that the body accepts that organ and the body doesn't reject it, and that the new liver does not come under the same insults that led to their own liver being damaged in the first place. And I predominantly see people who are adults, but we do see some young people below the age of 16 years old who come to us in our hospital together with their parents as they transition from the children's hospital in the centre of town to our hospital, which is sort of located in the periphery.
Right. And doctor, if I may ask, what role does genetics play in this? Is it possible that if your parents have had a liver disease or any complaints regarding to the liver health, that you as their children will also at some point of life may develop it, because sometimes people might simply be leading a very healthy life but suddenly may come up with a liver related problem. Is that a possibility at all?
Sure, it's a very important and a very good question. Genetics alone, in isolation, does not cause the vast majority of liver diseases that we see. There are very, very few people, and I've been practicing liver medicine for more than 15 years now, and we can count the number of people where it's only due to genetics sort of on our hand. It's a very small, tiny, minuscule population where it's only genetics. But to answer your question, if your parents or brothers and sisters or even children have some form of liver disease, then the likelihood that you may develop a liver disease is greater than perhaps your best friend or your neighbour who doesn't have a family history. And that's for a number of reasons. So for example, we know that in our Asian communities, the chances of us developing diabetes, even with normal body weight, is much higher than certain other populations. And that in itself is a risk factor for developing liver disease. In people who have autoimmune conditions, either autoimmune liver diseases, thyroid problems, joint problems, those individuals and their families also have a higher chance of developing autoimmune liver diseases. So yes, the chances are greater, but it doesn't always mean that a person will get a liver disease because their family member has. It just means that there is another risk factor that has also come into play, which makes it more likely for them on their genetic background to run into problems.
Right. Doctor, I always ask this to everybody, all the experts in their respective field, that do you fear that when a patient from South Asian community comes to you, chances of women having detected their condition are higher than men? Because in South Asian communities, the culture is that the women always tend to, especially the age group of our mothers or grandmothers, they tend to ignore or avoid addressing any health-related issues. So is it a pattern that you have also noticed, that the South Asian patients, especially women, do report their health conditions quite late, and that further leads to pressure on NHS because they need hospitalization in the end?
So I would certainly agree that as a community as a whole, men and women of Asian backgrounds tend to present much later. And that is a real problem. And we find that our treatments may not necessarily work so well. The other thing that we sometimes find is that in our Asian community, there is a slightly greater resistance to accept certain forms of treatment. And particularly when it comes to women, for example, certain treatments are less well accepted by them and their partners and their families than they should be. For example, when somebody has quite advanced liver disease, then other organs can start to compromise nutrition. And good nutrition is one of the treatments that we need for people with liver disease. One of the treatments that we give to help people absorb the goodness from food, just as an example, is a capsule that replaces something that the body makes. And that capsule has got a gelatin coating, which is a form of pork meat. And because a lot of people of Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi origin do not eat meat, they don't want to take that supplement despite it being something that can potentially save their life. So there is sometimes a resistance to accept those treatments because of certain reasons. The language barrier is always also something that is quite challenging, because a lot of people in our parents' generation and the generations before, who may not necessarily speak English, are fearful of coming forward because they have symptoms, and they don't have the confidence to talk to their doctors about symptoms, or are not able to communicate what the symptoms mean for them. Feelings such as tiredness and itching are often dismissed by families, despite them being a sign of real problems. So I agree, it is a problem in the South Asian community, and it is particularly problematic in the women of our community, which is very sad to see.
ਰਾਈਟ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ अर्ली डिटैक्शन कल्ला साडे वास्ते ही फायदेमंद नहीं हैगा। ऑफ कोर्स जिन्ना छेती तुसी अपने डॉक्टर नूं जाके अपनी सिम्पटम्स बारे दसोगे उन्ना ही छेती ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ट्रीटमेंट दे सकते हैं, विच इज़ गुड फॉर अस इंडिविजुअली साडी फैमिली वाइज एक हैल्थी लाइफ स्टाइल लीड करन वास्ते ये बहुत ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है। बट एज अ कम्यूनिटी एक ये सिविक सेंस दे विच आंदा है, वी ओ दिस टू हॉस्पिटल्स एंड डॉक्टर्स। जिद्दां कि अजकल तुसी सारे एक्सपीरियंस कर रहे होने आ, जदों भी तुसी GP नूं कॉल करन दी कोशिश करोगे देयर इज़ अ लॉन्ग क्यू, काफ़ी बैकलॉग हैगा आ, उन्हां दे कोल बहुत प्रैशर आ अजकल पेशेंट्स दे वास्ते, उन्होंने देखण वास्ते NHS ते बहुत ज़्यादा हुण प्रैशर पै रहा हैगा आ। एंड अपॉइंटमेंट्स जिहड़ियां इन्नी छेती नहीं मिलदी जिद्दां पहलां हुंदा सीगा। सो ये क्यों हो रहा है? बिकॉज अजकल इन्नी ज़्यादा केसिस जिहड़े ने of high sensitivity, high demand of seeing doctors, and especially जिहड़े कि बीमारियां ने डायबिटीज़ और इन सम केसेस एज सीरियस एज कैंसर, इन्ना ज़्यादा हुण लोग जिहड़े रिपोर्ट कर रहे हैगे ने दैट NHS दे कोल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टू मीट विद एवरीबडीज़ नीड्स वो इन्ना सक्सैसफुल हुण नहीं है। साडी एज अ कम्यूनिटी ये जिम्मेदारी है कि जिन्ना छेती असी अपने सिम्पटम्स डिटैक्ट कर सकते हैं करिए, डॉक्टर नूं पहलां ही असी रिपोर्ट करिए, सो दैट इनिशियल स्टेजिस ते ही डॉक्टर सानू जिहड़ा ट्रीटमेंट दे के साडी जिहड़ी बीमारी आ उहनूं ठीक करन दी कोशिश कर सके, इंस्टेड कि असी उस बीमारी नूं इन्ना अगे तक लैके जाइए कि फिर सानू एडवांस ट्रीटमेंट्स की लोड़ पए तो NHS से जिहड़ा प्रैशर हैगा आ जो कि ऑलरेडी बहुत ज़्यादा है वो असी होर उहदे विच जिहड़ा आ ऐड करोगे। सो एक कल्ला साडे वास्ते एज एन इंडिविजुअल ही नहीं, एज अ फैमिली ही नहीं, एज अ सोसाइटी एज वैल ये साडी जिम्मेदारी आ कि असी आप दा ख्याल रखिए ताकि जिहड़े डॉक्टर्स या जिहड़े हॉस्पिटल्स या उन्हां ते प्रैशर जिहड़ा आ थोड़ा घट हो सके। आई होप I have given the right message, doctor, because that is quite a common complaint of people from our community, that it isn't the same as it was before. Until 2019 you could call your GP and schedule an appointment just for the same day, but it isn't the same anymore. This thing comes from especially a lot of the community, from elderly or people who are not able to communicate that well in English, and it does create a sense of anxiety in general population when they're not able to see their doctors, because a lot of people are not comfortable just to speak on the phone. They want that comfort of their doctors actually checking them.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, it's very sad to see what's happening to the UK health system. And yeah, I mean, the widespread, systematic underfunding has led to GP surgeries, hospitals being overwhelmed, and we hope that will change soon. One thing I would certainly say is that you are in charge of your own healthcare. This goes to everybody. And if you are not able to get a same-day appointment to see your GP, then ask your GP and say, can I have an appointment in future, in a few days, next week? Can I book a scheduled appointment? Persevere to try and book an appointment if you're not feeling right. Don't give up just because you cannot get through to the phone on the very first day, and you cannot book an appointment on the same day. The second thing is, if you are already under the care of the hospital physician or a surgeon is sort of in hospital and you're wondering what's happening to your test results or appointments, take ownership and do make contact with that person through their secretary, through sort of directly if you have access. And that's certainly something that we encourage, because in a currently imperfect system as the UK health service is, you need to take charge of your own health. Only then will you have earlier diagnosis and early treatments and remedies to your symptoms.
जी, डॉक्टर ने बहुत अच्छे जिहड़ी आ दो चीज़ां दसियां ने कि GP दे कोल जे तुहानूं अपॉइंटमेंट नहीं मिल रही हैगी, तुसीं हार ना मन्नो। तुसीं ये नहीं सोचना हैगा कि मेरा फ़ोन नहीं चुक रहे तां मैं रहण दिंदे आ, ਉਹ कदे भी नहीं देखणगे, ऐदां दी कोई गल नहीं हैगी। तुसीं अपनी तरफ तो पूरी ट्राई करनी हैगी आ, बिकॉज इन दी एंड इट इज़ योर ओन हैल्थ विच विल बी इफेक्टेड। तुसीं अपने आप दी हैल्थ नूं सब तो ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंस दे के ट्राई जरिया करते रहनी आ कि तुसी कॉल करो जे अज अवेलेबल नहीं आ कल हो सकती है 2-3 दिन बाद हो सकती है अगले हफ्ते हो सकती है 2-3 हफ्ते छड्ड के हो सकती है तुसी अपॉइंटमेंट जरूर लैनी आ ते जाना जरूर आ तुसी हार नहीं मननी एक जेह्ड़ा लथार्जिक एटीट्यूड नहीं दिखाना कि रैन दिंदे आ मैं ठीक हो जाना कोई गल नहीं अपने घर च तुसी होम रेमेडीज़ करदे आ विच इज़ ओके विच इज़ फाइन लेकिन कई बारी इदां हो सकता है कि ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟੈਸਟ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਉਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਬਾਹਰ ਆ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਘਰੇ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੂਗੀ ਸੋ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਤਰਫ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਟਰਾਈ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ ਛੱਡਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਓ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਇਲਾਜ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਈਮੇਲ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਤੇ ਈਮੇਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਕਾਲ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੈਕਟਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਓਨਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਅੱਛਾ ਵਰਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੀ ਆਪ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਮੇਰੀ ਹੈਲਥ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਕੁਛ ਨਾ ਕੁਛ ਕਰਕੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਇੱਕ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਲੱਭਣਾ ਆ ਟੂ ਟਾਕ ਟੂ ਦ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸੋ Dr. Trivedi, this was about the liver diseases today and I hope ਕਿ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਰੋਤੇ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਅੱਜ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ little bit clarity ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਆਈ ਹੋਣੀ that first of all, what are the signs to look for and that this can happen to anybody. This is not limited to any ethnicity, any gender or an age group. So if you've got any of the symptoms that the doctor have spoken about, that tusi देर नहीं करनी तुसी अपनी appointment ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਲੈਣੀ ਹੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ Doctor, is there anything that we as laymen have left and not spoken about? Anything that you can add to today's discussion?
No, I think the only additional thing I would want to mention is one of the things that we've observed over the last 10, 15, 20 years is that survival from other health conditions such as heart disease, cancers, breathing problems has actually improved year on year. But the growth in the number of people who have liver disease and as a population the number of people who are dying of liver disease or who need liver transplants is actually getting worse and going up and up. So liver disease is one of the things that really stands out beyond heart disease, beyond cancer, wherein we really need to make good advancements. We need to prevent, not just treat people who have it, and that's only going to happen if people come forward earlier and we diagnose people earlier and we can treat people with better outcomes at a much earlier stage than we do currently.
Right. Is there any support group? I mean, I was just going to end it. Is there any support group available from NHS or any other organizations where people who have undergone liver transplants early in their life or not perhaps through UK system but anywhere else they might be living before that they can connect with people and actually seek some common support from the system?
Sure, absolutely. So in the United Kingdom the liver transplant centres that we have located 2 in London, 1 in Birmingham, Cambridge, Newcastle, Leeds, Edinburgh, Dublin, which is sort of obviously outside the UK but sort of very close to home. All of these places will have a transplant team which will have transplant coordinators that will offer support. As a national society, the British Liver Trust and NHS Blood and Transplant do offer support as well, and they are very easy to find, say on Google for example. And there are support groups for organisations, run by organisations specific to each type of liver disease. So, for instance, people who have autoimmune liver diseases, there's an organisation I work with called PSC Support, another one called PBC Foundation, and these are organisations which support people with individual conditions, whether they've had a transplant or not. And we do encourage everybody when they have a diagnosis, certainly when they undergo transplantation, to reach out to these organisations. They can meet like-minded people who've either had the procedure or who are waiting to have a procedure, and talk to them about different treatment experiences and share their life experiences with one another as well.
Would you like to recommend any University of Birmingham page where people can log on and read more about liver diseases or any other information?
Absolutely, I'm very happy to provide those to the channel. I can provide the websites for our liver disease program and the team who look after people, as well as some of the cutting edge research that we're doing here to try and treat people who've already got established liver disease, as well as identify earlier and earlier signs of liver disease that can help people in the future. Absolutely.
ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਪੇजेस ਨੇ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ these are the links ਜਿੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ you can tell more about how the liver diseases will affect health to your parents, to your grandparents, and also read yourself if you're watching this show. And these are recommended pages by Dr. Palak Trivedi, who's an associate professor here at University of Birmingham. He's also working at Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham, and he's spoken extensively about liver diseases today. Our knowledge was specifically quite limited to cirrhosis or fatty livers or perhaps alcohol affecting livers more than any other thing, but doctor has really told us about some serious signs, some early detection techniques to look out for your health. And this is it, doctor. Thank you very much for joining us today on the SIKH channel. I hope all the people watching have really gained some knowledge.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Palak Trivedi in conversation with SIKH channel today, where he has imparted very important knowledge about liver diseases. But ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਲੋਕ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, the advice to you is to speak to your GP before making any self-diagnosis. ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ symptoms ਲੱਗ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਆ ਸਾਈਨਸ ਲੱਗ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ like we spoke about the ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੱਥਾਂ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਪੈਰਾਂ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਰੈਸ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ itching ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ self-diagnose ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ GP ਤੋਂ advice ਲੈਣੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ always speak to your GP before doing your self-diagnosis. ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ SIKH channel ਦੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ advice. ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅਗਲੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ 'ਚ ਨਈ health tip ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਰਵਾਂਗੇ ਜੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ